This is truly a celebration of the contributions women make in every aspect of life, in the home, on the job, in the community, as mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, learners, workers, citizens, and leaders. By gathering in Beijing, we are focusing world attention on issues that matter most in our lives, the lives of women and their families. Access to education, health care, jobs, and credit, the chance to enjoy basic legal and human rights, and to participate fully in the political life of our countries. What we are learning around the world is that if women are healthy and educated, their families will flourish. If women are free from violence, their families will flourish. If women have a chance to work and earn as full and equal partners in society, their families will flourish. And when families flourish, communities and nations do as well. That is why every woman, every man, every child, every family, and every nation on this planet does have a stake in the discussion that takes place here. The great challenge of this conference is to give voice to women everywhere whose experiences go unnoticed, whose words go unheard. Women comprise more than half the world's population, 70% of the world's poor, and 2/3 of those who are not taught to read and write. We are the primary caretakers for most of the world's children and elderly, yet much of the work we do is not valued, not by economists, not by historians, not by popular culture, not by government leaders. At this very moment, as we sit here, women around the world are giving birth, raising children, cooking meals, washing clothes, cleaning houses, planting crops, working on assembly lines, running companies, and running countries. Women also are dying from diseases that should have been prevented or treated. They are watching their children succumb to malnutrition caused by poverty and economic deprivation. They are being denied the right to go to school by their own fathers and brothers. They are being forced into prostitution, and they are being barred from the bank lending offices and banned from the ballot box. Speaking to you today, I speak for them just as each of us speaks for women around the world who are denied the chance to go to school or see a doctor or own property or have a say about the direction of their lives simply because they are women. The truth is that most women around the world work both inside and outside the home, usually by necessity. We need to understand there is no one formula for how women should lead our lives. That is why we must respect the choices that each woman makes for herself and her family. Every woman deserves the chance to realize her own God-given potential. But we must recognize that women will never gain full dignity until their human rights are respected and protected. It is a violation of human rights when babies are denied food or drowned or suffocated or their spines broken simply because they are born girls. It is a violation of human rights when women and girls are sold into the slavery of prostitution for human greed, and the kinds of reasons that are used to justify this practice should no longer be tolerated. It is a violation of human rights when women are doused with gasoline, set on fire, and burned to death because their marriage dowries are deemed too small. It is a violation of human rights when individual women are raped in their own communities and when thousands of women are subjected to rape as a tactic or prize of war. It is a violation of human rights when a leading cause of death worldwide among women ages 14 to 44 is the violence they are subjected to in their own homes by their own relatives. It is a violation of human rights when young girls are brutalized by the painful and degrading practice of genital mutilation. It is a violation of human rights when women are denied the right to plan their own families, and that includes being forced to have abortions or being sterilized against their will. If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all. And among those rights are the right to speak freely and the right to be heard. Women must enjoy the rights to participate fully in the social and political lives of their countries if we want freedom and democracy to thrive and endure. It is indefensible that many women in non-governmental organizations who wish to participate in this conference have not been able to attend or have been prohibited from fully taking part. As long as discrimination and inequities remain so commonplace everywhere in the world, as long as girls and women are valued less, fed last, overworked, underpaid, not schooled, subjected to violence in and outside their homes, the potential of the human family to create a peaceful, prosperous world will not be realized. Let us heed that call so we can create a world in which every woman is treated with respect and dignity. Every boy and girl is loved and cared for equally, and every family has the hope of a strong and stable future. That is the work before you. That is the work before all of us who have a vision of the world we want to see for our children and our grandchildren. The time is now. We must move beyond rhetoric. We must move beyond recognition of problems to working together to have the common efforts to build that common ground we hope to see.
Stephanie Street, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. Thank you for joining us as we discuss one of the world's most pressing challenges, empowering women and girls. Before we begin our program tonight, I'd like to take a moment to thank our partner in sponsoring tonight's program, Dean Skip Rutherford and the Clinton School of Public Service. Thank you as always, Skip. A community can only reach its full potential by involving everyone in its social and economic life. When we expand access to education, increase economic opportunity, and provide critical health care to young mothers and newborns, we lift women and their families and their communities out of poverty. You're going to be hearing from our distinguished panel very shortly. They all bring different perspectives and experiences to our discussion, but they are all in agreement that empowering women and girls is an investment that pays the highest dividends. For those who want to share in this discussion tonight via Facebook or Twitter, please use the hashtag #Empower when posting on social media. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Penny Abordina, to join me. Penny is the head of Women and Girls and the Associate Director of Commitments for the Clinton Global Initiative, which we call CGI. CGI convenes global leaders to devise and implement innovative solutions to the world's most pressing problems. Penny joined CGI in 2009 to develop strategy highlighting and integrating the gender lens throughout the organization's various platforms. She has since led the program's evolution into one of CGI's most successful endeavors. We are so grateful, Penny, that you have joined us. She had a very long flight to get here from London. We're very grateful that you've joined us for this timely and extremely important discussion. So please join me in welcoming Penny Abordina.
Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be here, and thank you to Stephanie and her extraordinary team for including me in this day of inspiration and learning. We had the honor of speaking with some high school students this morning, and that got us pretty excited for tonight and to be here with you. Now, before I dive into the work of CGI, which Stephanie mentioned is an initiative of the Clinton Foundation, it's my pleasure to tell you more about the new No Ceilings, the Full Participation Project, which is led by Secretary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton. The full participation of women and girls is critical to achieving global progress, but accurate information about the status of these women and girls is fragmented and limited. So the No Ceilings initiative is working with partners to collect, create, and present data about the gains made and the gaps that remain. The No Ceilings team has recently partnered with the Gates Foundation to collect a comprehensive set of data to assess the gaps as well as the gains for women and girls over the last 20 years. It's really an assessment of how far we've come on women's rights or human rights and human rights or women's rights, which you just heard Secretary Clinton speak about at the Beijing Conference for Women in 1995. In 2015, the No Ceilings team will issue a progress report based on these findings. The purpose is to elevate the efforts of agencies and organizations around the globe working on girls and women. This data will be used to chart a path towards full participation by engaging new and existing partners across a variety of sectors to educate a broad audience about the critical need for full participation and, most importantly, to inspire them to action. We know that the full participation of women and girls is not just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. And we hope that you will join us in this effort. More details on how to engage will be available and is available right now on the Clinton Foundation website. Now, I have the honor of engaging and supporting this effort through my role at the Clinton Global Initiative. 5 years ago, we began an effort to promote and advocate for girls and women to be included in all of the efforts of CGI members. For those of you new to CGI, we are a membership organization that hosts convenings around the year to encourage our members to act on issues that they care about to address global challenges. Ideally, you are acting and our members are acting in cross-sectoral partnerships. So it is so important, and this is what you're going to hear about tonight, and from experts that represent all of these sectors, but how the private sector, governments, nonprofits, individuals all can work together. What makes our model unique to other conferences is that we require all of our members to make commitments to action to address global challenges, and I am proud to report that every single person on the stage tonight has multiple, if not at least one, commitment to action with the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, in 2009, we introduced a better way to improve conditions and opportunities for the demographic comprising half of the global population. This year marks our 5th anniversary of our renewed and retooled effort to empower girls and women. Our evolution over the years has included the launch of the Girls and Women's Track, now an integral part of CGI's Commitments to Action portfolio. Over the years, leaders from every sector have leveraged this focus area to make high-impact CGI commitments that, for example, integrate women-owned businesses in corporate supply chains, keep girls and women top of mind in all development efforts, and advance gender equity through sports and other creative avenues. In our programming, CGI has also reinforced our belief that girls' and women's issues are not independent, but central to every global challenge, from energy efficiency to disaster response. This strategic integration of the gender lens into all of CGI's efforts has led to very encouraging results. In 2013, our members made 180 commitments to action, and over 60% took a substantive approach to empowering girls and women in their work. This year, as our members embark on reimagining impact, which is the theme for our 2014 meeting, CGI is ready to lead by example. I'm very excited, this is brand new, this was finalized about 2 weeks ago, to announce that CGI is evolving the Girls and Women's track into a standalone effort that will allow us to enhance our work to empower half the population 5 years after the debut of our comprehensive gender lens. This new effort will help CGI elevate our girls and women's related work and ensure that through an organizational mandate and strategic restructuring, we do it even better. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator and advocate of girls and women's empowerment, Jerry Jones. When he's not figuring out how to address global challenges, he is Axiom's Chief Ethics and Legal Officer, Executive Vice President and Assistant Secretary. He joined Axiom in 1999 and oversees legal and privacy matters and assists in the strategy and execution of mergers and alliances in the company's strategic initiatives. Prior to joining Axiom, he was employed for 19 years as an attorney with the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, representing a broad range of business interests. He serves on the University of Arkansas at Little Rock Board of Visitors and is a co-founder of UHire US. But very interestingly and very recently, Jerry is also a special advisor to the Club de Madrid, an organization comprised of 93 former presidents and prime ministers of 62 democratic countries. Thanks to Jerry's advocacy, the Club de Madrid held one of their annual meetings right here in this room in December 2012, and the focus of the entire summit was on empowering girls and women. It is my pleasure to introduce Jerry Jones.
I didn't know I did half that stuff. This is great. Judy's always wondering what I'm doing. Now she knows. Well, welcome. We have a great panel this evening. I'd like for everybody to come on up to the stage. And as has already been said, we started the day with a group of high school students from Conway at the Clinton School. In your seats this evening, there was a sheet that has the short bios for everybody on stage this evening. So I'm going to dispense with a full reading of the amazing accomplishments of this group. But just to set the stage, I'll hit a few high points. So from the United States Department of State, immediately to my right is Greta Shetter. Greta is the Senior Economic Policy Advisor for the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues at the United States Department of State. In this role, she bears a substantial responsibility in coordinating the activities government-wide of our government with respect to these issues. And the role of coordination is really critical. Another initiative that she is participating in is a core team member of the Equal Futures Partnership, which is a White House-led initiative comprised of 24 member countries focused on female empowerment. Welcome. Immaculate K. Terry from Rwanda, but more importantly, a second-year student at the Clinton School for Public Service here in Little Rock. Immaculate has done a number of things already in her very short life. She is a graduate of the University of Colorado at Denver. She has interned with a local global organization, the Heifer International organization based here in Little Rock. And she worked with them in Rwanda, and she's also volunteered for the Habitat for Humanity, the Rescue Mission, and a number of other things. To her right is Dr. Sarah Cambrew, the president of the International Center for Research on Women. And Dr. Cambrew has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of gathering data of all sites, of all types involving female issues around the globe, with a special emphasis on developing countries and in particular in Africa. Ruby Johnson gets the prize for coming the longest distance to this conference today. She is from Sydney, Australia. She's currently working in Mexico. And Ruby is a young feminist who has done a lot of work with UN Women in Cambodia, and she is currently working in Mexico, I believe, and is a part of FRIDA, the Young Feminist Fund. And Ruby will be sharing with us the importance of funding for women's initiatives around the world. To Ruby's right is Jimmy Briggs. Jimmy is a native of St. Louis, graduate of Morehouse College, and has done some amazing things as a professor and perhaps more importantly as an author and a journalist. His book, Innocence Lost When Child Soldiers Go to War, is an amazing story of what happens when children are enlisted in armies and get thrown into areas of conflict. And his writings have justifiably won a lot of awards, and he's got a new book coming out fairly soon. He's also the founder of an organization by the name of Man Up. Jimmy will talk about how we need to change our culture. We can change laws somewhat rapidly, but changing culture is a longer and perhaps more difficult journey. And then finally, Gina Lopez. And Gina is the senior manager for the Corporate Affairs Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative at Walmart Stores, Inc. She is also a graduate of the Clinton School of Public Service. She has lived in Bentonville, and now she's living in Silicon Valley. And I'd like to start with Gina for a couple of reasons. One, she's got to leave early because she's got to catch an airplane and go back to California tonight. But more importantly, I want to start with the role of the private sector on women's empowerment. You know, we all know that Walmart is the world's largest corporation with annual revenue last year north of $470 billion, operating in 23 different countries. And there have been times when Walmart has been criticized for being too big and too powerful. But there have also been times when Walmart has shown itself very, very well in aligning its business interest with social progress. And Gina, if you wouldn't mind, could you talk about how a massive corporation such as Walmart, that is as big as many countries' economies, decides to align its business model with a social issue?
Yeah, well, I think what's really interesting about our work at Walmart is that we're able to use our size and scale to really create a commitment to empower women that is quite vast. So we're able to look across our supply chain to look at how can we empower our suppliers, our women-owned businesses, and also our large suppliers that work with us to create more diversity in the teams that engage in our work. So it's really great to have this opportunity to engage in different types of commitments. For instance, I work on Walmart's commitment to source $20 billion from women-owned businesses in the US to double our sourcing in international markets and to continue to grow an e-commerce platform where we sell products from women-owned businesses, and that's called Empowering Women Together. We also have a large commitment to empower 1 million women in training, and that's training in agriculture, factories, job entry, and then our diversity and inclusion commitment is to diversify our supplier base and the teams that engage both on the merchandise and services of our suppliers. So we really have a great opportunity to look across our work at Walmart and really embed our commitment into the business. So this isn't just something that we're doing and the commitment's gone in a year. It's something that we're changing the way that we work as a company. And that's really exciting and innovative in my opinion. So I'm really fortunate to work with women entrepreneurs all over the world to help them sell their products to our customers. And this is not just a great thing to the women entrepreneurs, but a great thing to our customers. They're now able to purchase beautiful products that we didn't already have at Walmart, like baskets from Rwanda and jewelry from Peru and very unique products. So I think it's really exciting that the majority of our customers are women. So this is not just the right thing to do, but it's responsible business that we're investing in women and finding more ways to work with women across our supply chain.
What's been your experience in collaborating with other organizations in alignment with where you're trying to go?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that it's because of our partnerships with governments and nonprofits that we're able to create sustainable and scalable initiatives. Our work with CGI, for example, gives us great opportunity to work with the State Department, other corporations doing this work, ICRW, many of the leaders that are here today, to figure out how to really implement and execute our work. In 2011, we had these great big goals and what we wanted to do, but we had to figure out how to implement the work and how to make it work, to be honest. So I think we still have a long way to go, and we're certainly excited and on track to our 5-year commitment to the Clinton Global Initiative, but I think it's really because of collaboration that we're able to execute the work, and it's really exciting to have the opportunity to have thought leaders from all different sectors of government come together and also bring business to the table. My background is in social work and public policy, so I've been fortunate to work on women's empowerment initiatives, but I think it's really important for the business sector to be involved in this kind of work because it makes sense for them to be there. So I think through collaboration, we're able to really gain resources and really gain expertise to design programs and initiatives that are meaningful and really speak to the voice of the women that we are trying to reach.
Thank you. Immaculée, I'd like to turn to you for a moment and ask if you could talk for a little bit about what it was like to be a young girl growing up in your country of Rwanda and how the roles and responsibilities of Rwandan women have changed somewhat dramatically over just the last 20 years.
Yes, thank you. Well, I was very fortunate to grow up in Rwanda having parents who are educated, so I was exposed and offered an education that is similar to the education you have here. I went to international schools, but I recognize that that was a privilege that most people don't have. 20 years ago in Rwanda, women did not have access to the same rights or did not have rights that men have. They did not have access to property or wealth. It's only in 1999 that women could could succeed to their parents or have ownership of the properties that their parents will have passed on. And it's only in 2005 that women have equal access to land. So you could see that those changes are very new, and women still this day in Rwanda need to be empowered. They need to be encouraged to be out there and to to be out there and to get encouraged and have access to, although they are having more rights and the government is giving them more rights and there's more new changes happening, but they still need to be encouraged.
So not only could women not own property, could they inherit property?
They could not inherit property. It's also a very recent change that happened in around 1999.
So in your country, 20 years ago, the wealth would be passed down from one generation of men to the next
to another generation of men. Yes, if you're a girl or you're a widow, you will have to pass it on to the uncle or the next male in your family.
Okay. How did it go about changing?
The change happened because first it was necessary. 20 years ago we had genocide in Rwanda and the biggest number of the workforce died. So the country was left with women who were there and available to work but did not have the tools or the education. So the country had to empower those women so that they can replace and participate in the society that was left really with a big lack of men. So it came first because it was a necessity, and the country realized afterward that women were equipped and were capable of doing the same work as men. So then the changes started happening in the legislation so that women can have access to education and to rights, to banking. Before 1994, women could not open an account in a bank without the approval of their husband. You could not find a job without the approval of your husband. So all those changes happened first because it was a necessity, but then the country realized afterward that it was necessary and that they had to empower women.
And on a positive note, I understand that women now have a majority in the parliament.
Yes, the women, actually from the last election, which was last year, the women now occupy 64% of the seats in the parliament, which is a big achievement.
Yes, it is. Dr. Camboud, let me turn to you if I could. And you have done a lot of work about that is focused on the impact of violence against women in various countries around the world. What is your take on the current trend in terms of violence against women, and whether that is a structural or a cultural issue that can be overcome?
Well, thank you very much, and just delighted to be with you all this evening and celebrating Women's History Month. You know, the World Health Organization conducted what they called the global burden of disease, and for the first time, we measured women's experience of all forms of gender-based violence. And those studies show that 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will experience some form of violence. This is a global study. This includes our own country, our neighbor to the north, countries across the globe. Perhaps in a form that is closer to myself, something that resonates with me as a mother of a sophomore girl at Towson University. It freezes my heart and soul to think that she has a 1 in 3 chance of being sexually assaulted as a co-ed on campus. So this is a very real risk in our lives. We have to understand the forms and expressions of violence that women and girls and men and boys experience in their lives. Because if we're talking about economic empowerment, creating opportunities in the economic sphere, if we're talking about the role of education in being able to move societies forward, then people need to be able to leave their homes in order to have access to those resources. And this is how the expression of violence in public spaces or the fear of violence in public spaces tends to diminish horizons, especially for girls and young women. This is a problem, and I can tell you about dimensions of some studies we've done in India, but what I really want to do is pivot the conversation a little bit to say, we've got those numbers, but actually this is a problem we can do something about. And I think that this is very important. First of all, we have the cultural values that underpin these expressions of violence. We can deal with those cultural underpinnings by helping people understand that gender roles are learned. You're taught to be a boy, you're taught to be a girl. You learn how to interact with each other in school, on the sporting fields, wherever you are being instructed or educated, this is how you're picking up your gender values. So if we learn them, we can unlearn them and we can relearn them. And this is the kind of structural interventions that ICRW has been doing in India, for example, where sexual violence and aggression against women is very high and very concerning. So these are programs that we do in school, Jerry, that have been very, very successful.
Okay. Jimmy, I think you would naturally follow that and share with us how you got Man Up started and why you did it and what it's all about.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Jerry. I'll echo Sarah and Gina, and just thanking you all for being here this evening and for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. It's heartening. This morning we spoke to high school students, and who had to be there out of necessity, of course, and there were a lot of young men in the audience. There seem to be a fewer proportion of men here this evening, but there are quite a few of you, so I appreciate that, your presence in this conversation. I started Man Up, 4 years ago this summer. Prior to starting Man Up, I'd been a journalist for many years, for almost 20 years. And in my work as a journalist, I know my own personal transformation, covering conflict mainly. And through that frame, initially focusing on child soldiers, but then seeing the impact of conflict and crisis on the lives of women and girls, it was incredibly illuminating and ultimately transformational, because I just felt I started to understand the daily tragedies that too many women and girls endure, not just through conflict, but just by the nature of their gender in societies. And so I wanted to create a platform for young people generally, but specifically young men, boys, to be allies, to be able to challenge the norms, the normal constructs of what it means to be a man, that identity. So we launched Man Up in 2010 in South Africa at the World Cup, working with youth from 25 countries who wanted to go back to their respective communities and create initiatives that address different forms of gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence, using the arts, mainly music, as well as sports. And today we're still active in those countries. And I was telling Sarah earlier, right now we're doing a big project in the Great Lakes region of Central East Africa, a messaging campaign called Are You Man Enough? Basically to engage young men and boys to address the issue of sexual and gender-based violence. Sarah, everything that Sarah said, she's brilliant in this work, and I totally agree with her. I think one of the things we were saying this morning, which I would say again here more explicitly, is that we're talking about very, very global issues of inequality, economic, political, social, and also gender-based violence. But these are not issues that happen solely over there. As Sarah said, they're happening here as well in our communities, such as Little Rock and nationally. And I think it's important that, one, we recognize this is a global issue, not just a developing world issue, but also, I say this more to the men in the audience, but also to the women who have male partners or men in their lives, siblings, so forth, that it's critical that young men and boys are allowed to challenge the norms of masculinity, the norms which typically are negative. And I think too many men, for a while I'll include myself in this group. Too many men, probably I would assume most of the men in this audience, if I have to bet on it, but too many of us think that we're good guys because we don't engage in overtly misogynistic behavior. We don't use certain language. We don't force women to have sex. We don't physically abuse women, but at the same time, that's half of being a good guy, which is one of the things we say in Man Up. The other half of being a good guy is actually doing something, because your goodness can't be based on what you don't do. It's a verb, it's an action. You have to do something to be a man, to be good. So that means standing up, holding other men accountable for their behavior and their language, and really modeling a different type of manhood that says it's okay to be sensitive or affectionate or quote unquote emotional. It's okay to stand up with women and be a man.
Thank you. Ruby, let's talk about the role of women's organizations in providing support, and particularly the role of the Young Feminist Fund to finding transformative young women to be leaders and supporting them.
Thank you so much, and I'm also very happy to be here with you tonight and share some of my perspectives as a young woman working in philanthropy. I will just pause just to explain to you what Frida is and how we got started, because I think probably most of you don't know what Frida is. Frida, the Young Feminist Fund, started in 2010. It started because a group of young women from about 10 countries from around the world came together and saw that there was amazing work being done by young women at the grassroots in communities in many countries, and it wasn't being funded. So there was a gap, and although we were seeing a rise in interest and investment in young women, girls, women, that sometimes the money wasn't actually getting to those groups in those communities. So Frida was created, and Frida is a fund. What it does, we actually do direct grant making to informal and formal groups of young women under 30. We say young feminists because we've found that young women that we're supporting identify as part of a movement. You know, they're trying to challenge power structures, look at some of these systemic issues around gender inequality, and for them it connects them to a movement. We also, in addition to providing funding, we actually provide capacity development opportunities, ways for those young women to connect. So, you know, these issues around violence against women that they're experiencing in a range of countries, by sharing strategies, they can actually build more sustainable change. And we've seen that it's really amazing when you actually put resources in the hands of young women, they really do take actions that lead to more transformative change. And I could talk about Frida for a long time, but I mean, I guess just to really mention one thing that is important for us is we trust young women to be the experts of their own reality. So what this means is that if you ask them and you give them resources, they very often will come up with really amazing solutions to these problems. In particular, using the arts, communications, really innovative strategies, engaging their communities around some of these, you know, cultural and social norms, as well as more political changes. In terms of the funding landscape, we see a whole range of different type of actors that are really, you know, starting to, over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, really support the empowerment of women and girls, and it's amazing and really excellent. And I commend, you know, all of the different actors, whether they're, you know, corporate. There's obviously a range of private actors, private-public partnerships. We're seeing different foundations. We also see individuals, young women. We see, you know, women of wealth. We see a range of people really seeing their act of giving as a mechanism for change, a route to power. So I think for me, as part of Frida, we're always trying to keep resources as part of the debate. That, you know, it's important to make commitments, but you need to put resources there. And it's really key to keep that central. And one more point I'll just mention, just to give you an example of the type of groups that we're funding with Frida and why it's so important. There's a group that we recently funded in Egypt. They're a group of young women in their early 20s. They started working together after the Arab Spring. So they saw their country going through democratic transition. They wanted girls and young women to be key in having a voice in that change. So, you know, they had theatre and they had different types of ways to engage their community to really ensure women's voices were key as leaders. But they couldn't get funding because they weren't registered. You know, they're just students. They don't have a bank. They didn't have a bank account. They didn't have, you know, these basic things. Donors didn't want to take a chance. So Frida and other women's funds were so key because we were able to take a risk, believe in them, and see them as a real solution for, you know, rebuilding Egypt and making sure that young women and girls were key. And they've now managed to get other resources and register. So, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Greta, you have quite a title. Global Women's Issues for the United States Department of State. I mean, what a scope of responsibility that is. Half the world's population or more. In your role in the Secretary of State's office, could you talk a little bit about how the United States government organizes itself to address women's empowerment issues around the globe? And also, we know that women and children bear a disproportionate negative impact from areas of conflict and areas of war. And what is the Department of State focused on in that regard as well?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you, everybody, and also to the panelists. It's appropriate that I come at the end because a lot of the work that we do actually is relying upon all the different partners that are here. So I wanted to kind of take a perspective of ultimately, why is the U.S. Department of State interested in investing in women and girls? So ultimately, the world is interconnected, and each nation's, their peace and security is at utmost importance. So for us, we see investing in women and girls as a U.S. foreign policy priority. And why is that? I wanted to kind of put it into 3 different areas. One is from a peace and stability perspective, an economic growth avenue. One is a multiplier effect, and the third is opportunity. So in the first is we're kind of looking at it from peace and stability. When there's a lack of economic opportunity, it gives rise for more instability within a community, but also within an economy. From an economic perspective, we really look at there's 3 different areas that allow for economic growth to come about. So that's capital, your human capital, and then excess, which is technology. So your human capital, let's say you've got 100 people live in a country, your capital is about, let's say, your land. If you're only utilizing 50% of that population, or if you're only giving resources to 50% of that population, or if you're limiting the ability for 50% of that population to be able to actually use the other portion, your economic growth is going to slow. And so that's when you hear the topic of half the sky, or women hold up 50% of the population is not being utilized with the potential. It really comes back actually to an economic growth formula. It's very important. Women are a key piece of economic growth. So we have to look at what are those barriers that inhibit them from being able to participate in the economy. And actually we find that, as Macule illustrated, that out of 143 countries surveyed around the world, 128 have at least one law or one barrier that inhibits women from being able to participate. It might be land, lack of ability to own land, and maybe a lack of ability to open up a bank account. And a lot of times it might be there might not be laws specifically, but it might be something as discrimination or violence, the threat of violence that inhibits women from being able to participate. So then we kind of look at the next bucket. So the multiplier effect. And we were talking about this earlier. Women are a huge multiplier of actual economic growth and opportunity within their communities. It's been shown that women invest 90% of their income back into their families and back into local communities. And this, you'll see, also is a big piece of why when we look at conflict situations and rebuilding social capital, it's very important because women are a key part of really helping to increase and rebuild the social capital of communities that have gone through certain types of situations, as Immaculate illustrated. But at the same time, when we're looking at it from an investment perspective, from a business perspective, investing in women is the best area actually to get a return on your investment because they're going to be reinvesting that back into the communities. So that's another strong point for us. And then the third part is just opportunity. So we look at economic growth. SMEs account for 90% of US exporters. It's 98%. So that's just small and medium enterprises within the US. So if you're looking at who they're having their transactions with, it's not going to be large businesses, most count, it's going to be other SMEs. So if we're looking at creating a strong economic and strong global environment, we need to be looking at how we're also supporting other SMEs globally to be able to have that transaction and work with the US in terms of trade and really balancing that out. So then we look at constraints. Often people will say, well, are there really constraints that limit women from being able to participate in the economy? So I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier that there are a number of different laws, but we also break it down into, the State Department looks at it in 4 key areas. So access to markets, so you'll see whether that's women's ability to be able to be mobile, to go to markets, what's their knowledge in being able to trade with other countries, access to capital. You'll find that 70% of women entrepreneurs say they have difficulties in accessing finance. So this is a huge gap. That actually relates to $260 billion of missing opportunity that could be had by companies, by investors, by funds in order to be able to invest in women as a market. The third is skills and capacity building. So we'll mention, as mentioned here, investing in women's skills, allowing them to be able to reach those levels really enables them to grow, but also be able to get into some of the higher value jobs, receives a big piece for STEM. And then the fourth area is leadership, a voice and agency. So it's so important, as was pointed out, to have women being able to reach those positions of parliamentarian or leadership positions, because you find that countries where there's more equality of women at the top, there's more likelihood for reform. So that's just to give you a little bit of overview of the importance that the US government places on investing in women and girls from a number of different perspectives. And we really do see it as a foreign policy priority for the US.
And there's actually a national action plan around this, which is a formal plan that the federal government has come together on. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, coordination is so key. There's so many different government agencies and many different efforts, whether it's Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Treasury, USAID, the U.S. Department of State. We all have a role to play in this. And again, we have a strong role with both the private sector as well as NGOs and civil society. And so what the plan does is it really kind of lays out how we should be communicating, how we should be coordinating, how we should be making sure that we're really integrating gender into every single aspect of our U.S. foreign policy as it relates to peace and security.
Okay. Gina, don't miss your flight. You might need to leave.
Is it time? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm so
Thank
sorry.
you.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Shall we have some questions, comments, questions from the audience? They'll bring a mic to you so we can all hear in just one moment.
Hi there, my name is Mara D'Amico and I'm a second-year student at the Clinton School of Public Service. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really enjoyed your comments. You all touched on this a little bit, specifically Mr. Briggs, but I'm really interested in ways that we can more effectively engage men in empowering women, specifically addressing violence against women and addressing this concept of masculinity in our society and how that's harmful not only to women but also to men, to everyone. So I was just wondering, in the different realms that you all operate in, what are some really effective tools that we can use to engage men in empowering women? Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure and do hope that my colleagues on the panel will respond to that as well, because they all have very distinct perspectives on that issue as well as I. With Man Up, as I was alluding to before, our main way of reaching young men is basically going to where they are. That's why sports is a big tool for us. Working with coaches and athletes during matches, during practices, especially coaches, because for a lot of young men, playing on a team or playing a sport, having coaches, the coaches are often the most consistent contact with male authority figures, especially if there's not a father in the home. Also, we do a lot of work as an organization, but individually. I spend a lot of time going to schools, doing workshops and talking with young men, sometimes alone, sometimes young men with young women, about the consequences of sexual and gender-based violence, what it looks like, and ways of intervening, talking about bystander intervention. Personally, and I don't think the space is there yet. I think we need to start addressing this issue much earlier. A lot of the men's organizations, the number of men's organizations focusing on inequality and gender violence is growing. It's not a lot. It's not many compared to the women's organizations, of course. But most of the men's organizations, most organizations that focus on men, led by men, are dealing with young men, adolescents, 20-somethings, older. And I do it too. Most of the time I'm speaking to that population as well. I'll be honest with you though, I'll just be very candid. I think it's too late to start talking to someone who's 17 or 18 or older about negative masculinity and stopping violence against women. I think if we're serious about dealing with the issue from a preventive perspective, we have to start talking to children, boys and girls, in kindergarten and first grade, like really having these candid conversations. We know from the CDC and OJJDP at Department of Justice and the World Health Organizations that there are too many young kids, male and female, who are witnessing intimate violence in the home. Too many kids who are going to school with kids, other kids, who are themselves victims or survivors of violence, but we don't talk about it, especially in this society. You know, places like Egypt or India, different parts of Africa. South Africa, I was there last year for the State Department meeting with Sesame Street, and they talk about these things very candidly, very early. Here in the States, we wait until people are in high school and already survivors of molestation, dating violence, maybe they're in college and they're raped in college. That's when we start talking about it. So I just think we have to find integrated ways in the classroom, through media, in the home, to introduce these issues in an age-appropriate way, but in a very honest way. Because kids, especially as the men in the room, we were talking about this earlier, the high school students this morning. There's a window of manhood, but when you're until you're 10 or 11 years old, you can kind of be ambiguous masculinity. You can cry, you can wear certain clothes, you can act a certain way before your manhood is challenged. At 11 beyond, certain things you can't do, you have to man up negatively. And so I think we need to just kind of break that construct that says men have to behave a certain way, and men can't be a certain way, not just amongst themselves, but also with women as well.
Right. Yes, Rudy.
Just a few comments. Yeah, I think in many ways it starts with coming to terms that it's not a women's issue, and that building common understanding, and really, champions that we see taking these key steps, really celebrating their work and finding ways to replicate that and talk to each other. And I will give you one example of a group that we recently are supporting in Namibia. They engaged young men to be part of their work, and as a result of really integrating them, dialoguing with them, those young men actually took action and did a walk in high heels this is just 2 days ago, down the main street of the city where they live, and it was about walking a mile in women's shoes. And it's really about building that understanding and just doing these things that can be really fun, but really celebrating that work when men do come out and take part.
Yeah, I might add on that as well. I mean, we really see the importance too of leadership and also the policy role in this. The Obama administration, President Obama, as well as Vice President Biden, Secretary Kerry, have made a number of speeches and claims about the importance of addressing gender-based violence. And you're starting to see the conversation now change in countries. So through this initiative that you mentioned earlier, the Equal Futures Partnership, countries have to make commitments of what they're going to do to advance women's economic and political participation. And 11 out of those countries actually chose to do something on gender-based violence because they really see it as a great barrier. And starting the conversation and having that leadership at the top then sets a lot of the things we were talking about earlier in terms of setting the cultural change that's necessary.
Yes, sir.
How about faith, religion, whatever? Talk about it. It's a sensitive area, and sometimes culture and faith, religion are mixed. So how do you do that? How do you go about doing that as the United States?
So often we do work with religious leaders in all contexts, especially in areas where it's sensitive. We were actually having a conversation about this earlier, about working in areas in South Asia or the Middle East and Northern Africa where there might be perceived different religious conflicts with women's economic empowerment or women's empowerment in general. And a lot of it, and I think there's some great examples across the board also within Africa, where it's about sitting down with religious leaders, sitting down with community leaders, and understanding the context and the benefits to the community, not trying to go too fast, really looking at what are those types of interventions or where progress happens slowly. You do have to take that into consideration, because if you move too fast, you can see a backlash. And that is something that we do look at. So, but we do find that a number of religious leaders are actually in favor of women's empowerment, but it's looking at how you work with them and work with the context of each community environment. Every situation is different.
Are you talking about religion and faith leaders abroad or in this country?
The Constitution is basically sufficient, but abroad is
Smiles, but okay.
Yeah, abroad, please.
Okay.
So I would echo what Grito was saying. I think that you have to assess who are the opinion leaders in a community and present the data to them. I am so jazzed by data. People respond to information. Exactly, thank you. And so if you can lay out an issue and help people understand what is the cost to a family, to the community, because a certain practice might be creating a negative benefit, it's counterintuitive, then people understand that and they'll find ways to move things forward. I agree, it has to be at a pace with the folks in the community. Don't go too fast, because that's going to be the recipe for failure.
Yes, on the front row.
Let me get a mic too.
I'm Katie. I'm a senior at Episcopal Collegiate, and thank you. Oh, hey! I know him. You've been talking a lot about a lot of foreign issues, but I heard you say that in Rwanda, 64% of parliament is women, and in America, a majority of our politics is dominated by men, and I would like to hear some suggestions and some thoughts on how we can aid to get women more involved in politics in the States.
Let me chime in on that. When I started law school, there was only a handful of women in my law school class. And I am so proud to say that next year, Arkansas will have a majority female Supreme Court. So it has taken about a generation for that change to occur. And many times when you're looking at change, we're Americans. We expect that we can make it happen tomorrow, and we can get to the future faster than anybody else. But a lot of times it takes time. And when you're changing culture, you actually have to think about it may take a generation, as it has in terms of the membership of the Arkansas Supreme Court. In my lifetime was the first time that we had a female Supreme Court justice in Arkansas, in my lifetime. So we've come a long way. We need to speed it up. Obviously the numbers and female members of Congress have hovered between 17 and 20%. I think we're at an all-time high now. Eventually, that's probably going to even out. There was an article in the local paper today on this very issue that I would urge everybody to go take a look at. And it talked about how many times a woman waits to be asked to do something, when a man will just do it. And the person that was being quoted was a female office holder. And she was basically saying if she had waited to be asked to run, she'd never have run. She had to make the decision to take the risk to get involved. And I think that we're getting to the point in our society, in our country, to where within your generation, within your lifetime, we will be through with the conversation around the first female astronaut, the first female general, the first female Joint Chiefs of Staff. Yes, perhaps the first female president. We'll be through with that, where it will be completely unremarkable Nobody will think anything different. That's my hope, that you and your classmates, as you live your lives, will choose to participate, will choose to move forward. You know, Secretary Clinton, when she was giving her concession speech when she was running for the presidency, talked about making 18 million cracks in that glass ceiling. It's up to America to decide that there's no ceiling for anyone, and especially for women. And we're not worried about those cracks. There's just not going to be a ceiling there anymore. You know, laws can change, sometimes quite rapidly. Culture takes a little bit of time. So that's what I would say to you. We're making progress. You know, our country is going in the right direction, generally. And if we think about where our country got started, it's just guys that look like me that happen to own some property that got to vote. Women didn't get to vote. African Americans didn't get to vote. Just guys like me. But we started a journey, and with each generation, it has gotten better. And that's what gets me excited about this. You know, we've talked about a lot of the challenges and a lot of the opportunities tonight. But glass half full, glass half empty. We're going to fill up that glass in this country pretty soon. So thanks for that question. Yes. Yes. Welcome back, by the way.
Hi, my name is Ali Sarkar, and I'm a Clinton student, a second-year Clinton student. I have a question about maybe some best practices or some initiatives that you've seen that have worked to kind of allow women and girls to rise in areas of conflict, and how we've been able to empower them in certain regions, and what those initiatives look like, and what those programs or projects look like.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, thanks very much for the question. First of all, it's so important for women to be at the table, right? As we're talking about peace and reconstruction, what is the society that we are seeking to build? So in ensuring that their voice is heard, that they have a role in decision making, this is where we would like to start, and I know that Greta will comment on that in a little bit. But coming from sort of a researcher activist perspective, it's then how do we involve those women and those girls and those men and those boys, because it has to be a collective effort moving forward. How do we help people define the situation on the ground, decide where there are opportunities to create progress, momentum moving forward, and then ensuring that those people are involved not only in creating the strategy and the action plan, but implementing it, monitoring, and evaluating it. So I've seen this done very, very effectively in Somaliland. I was working there with CARE many, many years ago. But what was fascinating is that the conflict created social disruption, which created a window of opportunity for incredible social change in a very short period of time. And so it required being very, very flexible and agile on the ground, working with whatever local authorities were available, whatever UN, United Nations forces were available, and with the communities themselves to figure out what is it we want to do, how are we going to do it, where are the resources, let's move it forward. And it's this engagement across all of these sectors to create a shared vision that I have found has worked very effectively in, for example, internally displaced camps.
So there's a lot of successes that we had. Really, a lot of the groundwork was laid under former Secretary Clinton. And I would say, you know, a lot of it, whenever we look at anything, it's to understand that the constraints and the issues, the challenges are multidimensional. So you have to really make sure that you are involving as much of the community as possible when you're looking at the different types of successes or different types of programs or initiatives that we want to look for. So let's say there might be, we're looking at education, girls' education is a big piece of that. Just setting the policy, the dialogue. So one, for example, one recent success is that we've worked with USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, looking at how we should be integrating language that specifically says that the barriers that inhibit women from being able to export or be women, barriers that specifically geared towards women's entrepreneurship need to be removed. And that's working through a commerce or working through a trade office between two different countries. So it's actually getting the language set and having both sides understand that. I think that one of the biggest issues is actually recognition of the challenge that's there. There's a lot of different levels in terms of how you really go about seeing some of the different changes that we want to experience, I guess. But I think a lot of it is it's very broad, sorry, I just got a little lost in my words.
I think what you're hearing is an exchange between what we must do at a policy level and what we must do at the ground level, and how the two must meet, and that's how we create an enabling environment for change. How that change moves forward, if that change moves forward, there are so many factors that come into play, but this is how we create the best possible scenario for that change to happen.
Yeah, let me actually pick up on that. So, for example, we at the State Department have a very strong value in public-private partnerships. So we really understand that it needs to be at the policy level, it needs to be the private sector, and we need to be engaging with civil society. So what do? So one example is that we launched actually under former Secretary Clinton, and with Walmart was one of the partners, is an initiative called We America, so Women's Entrepreneurship in the Americas. So really looking at how we were working in a collaborative effort to address all the different barriers. So we looked at what we were doing at the policy level, what we were doing with the private sector, and how we're getting that conversation going. So what were companies doing within countries in terms of being able to both invest in women, but also pull women into their supply chains. And then actually working with the women entrepreneurs themselves, saying, what are some of those challenges that you're having, and making sure that we are pulling that voice into the conversation and addressing those issues. And then providing different types of programming that help bridge the gap. Because I think that's what a lot of all of us work on together, is identifying where that gap is, where potentially policy isn't enough or a program isn't enough, and where that needs to be merged together. And where I would say that the best solutions come from is when you have multiple stakeholders at the table to really identify where that gap exists.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question. Mayor Hayes?
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks to all of y'all. This has been really very intriguing. Jerry introduced the title I had for 24 years as mayor, but the best title I like is grandfather. And
I'm a new one too. I kind of like that as well.
And I'm in a hurry. I'm in a hurry because my two granddaughters, one turned 11 and the other just turned 9. Got a little grandson that's 5, and so I'm in a hurry to try to make sure that those two granddaughters have, and I guess I'll sort of ask your comments to be relative to this country. You know, if I wanted to get up in the morning and try to start, and I like the ground level comment that was just made, the ground and the policy level. I want to be on the ground. So if I wanted to start doing something in the morning to make sure that those two granddaughters had an equal access and equal chances to do what my grandson has an opportunity to do, what would you suggest that I get working on in the morning?
Great question.
I have a 12-year-old daughter, soon to be 13, so I can relate. But to be honest with you, I would say focus on your grandson, because the girls, your two granddaughters, they're not the ones creating the challenges. And I hate to frame it this way, but they're not the problem. The grandson, if he's not groomed, if he's not mentored in the right way, he will be the problem for those two girls and other women in his life. I think, you know, for too long, as I was saying, I've always said before, men and boys were not included as part of this discussion. We're seen as part of, not the solution, because men can't be seen as saviors to women, but as allies to his sisters. He can be allies to them and help hold the men around him accountable, but also be accountable to them as well, in terms of making that path easier. I'm with you. I worry about my daughter all the time because of seeing the boys that come around her freaks me out a little bit, to be honest with you. But again, I mentor her and I tell her she can do anything, and I want her to have limitless imagination, but the problems that she will face and that your granddaughters could face in the future will not be created by them. It's going to be created by the little boys who see your granddaughters and my daughter in a very limited way, who can't see that those girls have the potential to do anything, be any place they want, have their own authority in their lives. I love what you were saying before about young women being the experts, paraphrasing, the experts in their journey. And we have to allow them to be that.
I want to add something that has been working in my country. In 2005, the First Lady started a program of mentorship for young girls in schools, and she connects women in public service and private service, and to young girls in high school and elementary schools. And that has been a good thing for those girls because they sometimes aspire to do things that they have never heard of anybody doing. They want to become a doctor, but their parents are farmers, and really those dreams are not attainable to the people who are around them. And you can have all the enabling environment, having access to school, but when you don't know anybody else who has done that, it can become restraining and you can feel powerless. So having access to those mentors and role models, people, young women and women who have accomplished things have really had a good impact on women and young girls to set their goals higher and to know that they are capable because there are other women who have done similar things.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to add.
Please.
So I think there's so much that you can do, each person from so many different levels. So from a policy perspective, who is running, and how could you potentially sponsor young girls or really move that within in terms of the leadership or mentorship within schools, or kind of just promoting that dialogue. In terms of working with the private sector, asking different companies that you're within the community, what are you doing to invest in women and girls? I think just even starting that dialogue is important. In terms of NGOs, just looking at how you're reaching out to the work that they do and how you're supporting and really kind of building that network. And then in general, just working with the community. And one of the big things that we've noticed in general for women's leadership and women's representation is the lack of role models. And so how do you get behind young girls and women and really provide that support? And often I think it does go and kind of complements what Jimmy was saying, is that yes, there are a lot of barriers, but often women might also internalize a lot of things more so than men. And so how do you help build up that confidence with women to be able to make sure that they know that they can achieve those and that there are no ceilings that are there? So I think that we all have a role in terms of being able to move it forward.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me wrap this up. I don't want to hold y'all in here, and everybody will be around as long as you would like, so feel free to come up and speak with our distinguished guest. We started this evening with the film clip of then First Lady Hillary Clinton giving that courageous speech in Beijing. And for those of you who have not seen her actual words in her own handwriting, they're in the library. And you can see where up to the very last moment she was tinkering with that document and writing it. And rewriting it. Now, on a personal note, I was really glad to see that because I used to be one of her law partners, and she would make my briefs look like a road map. So I was very pleased to see that on one of the most critical speeches that she's ever given, she was constantly revising and constantly trying to get it right. She knew that she was making history that day. She went to China to say what she did, but she wasn't by herself. There were some other courageous women who spoke that very day in 1995 in Beijing. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke, only she was under house arrest. And she said that in societies where men are truly confident, women are not merely tolerated, they're valued. Benazir Bhutto spoke, first female leader of a Muslim nation. And she said, in the fight for the liberation of women, there can be no neutrality. That was an amazing conference, and we're coming up on 20 years post-1995 in Beijing. We're here because it's Women's History Month. And I want to talk just very briefly about the history of our country and how we have progressed. As I mentioned earlier, when we started this country, only men had rights. Only men. But luckily, the Constitution was framed in order to form a more perfect union. To tell those of us who came after the forefathers and the foremothers of our country that, you know what? We got a good start here, but we probably don't have it all right. It's up to you to go forth and try to create a more perfect union. You know, we can be sad that we've not made the progress that we should, and we can be glad that we're making the progress that we are. Women in our country have only had the right to vote for less than 100 years. 100 years. So when I look to the future, I'm pretty optimistic that the next 100 years, in terms of equality in our country, are going to be better, not worse. But it's our responsibility to make it so. It's our responsibility. I am so pleased that we had someone here from the United States Department of State to talk about the importance of female empowerment and what our government is doing. And that's critically, critically important because we're leaders on this issue around the world. And if not our country, who? And speaking to the young folks in the room, we've tried to make some progress. You guys pick it up so that Pat's granddaughter can do whatever she wants to in the future. I want to thank everybody for coming. I really want to extend a very heartfelt thanks to the wonderful panelists who traveled a great distance to be with us today. And thank you very much for coming out this evening.